What's an epic way to start out a wildlife photography vlog? Wolves. Or how about wolves up close? Or even better, wolves hunting. This was the third active wolf hunt I've had the pleasure of witnessing, and man, it just never gets old. After chasing the elk out of the valley and into the trees, there was silence, and then the howls of the pack rang out over Yellowstone's rugged landscape, and even the sound of the mighty Yellowstone River flowing by was forgotten as the pack made their presence known. I thought they must have gotten a young elk, but as the howling continued, one by one, the rest of the pack began to appear along the ridgeline above me, moving north directly towards a massive herd of rutting elk. I hopped back into my truck and drove north to a large pullout that overlooked the herd. I expected that if the wolves hadn't gotten the younger elk, they would appear here. My vantage point wasn't nearly as close as it had been when watching them hunt along the riverside, but it was a place to watch them nonetheless. On the hillside, bull elk bugled out into the cool fall air, focused on their harems. They were so wired up, so testosterone driven, that the wolves were almost upon them before they even realized what was happening. The pack scattered the bulls and their harems in all directions. Eventually, they isolated a massive lone bull elk, surrounding him from every side. After a tense standoff, the wolves realized he was too big, too strong to take down, but they had thought about it. The pack continued north after about an hour of unsuccessful hunting. I tracked them far into the valley, near their den, where I lost sight of them roughly 3 miles from where I had first found them earlier in the day. It had been a very exhilarating morning in the park, but with all the action, I hadn't gotten the chance to eat yet. I ran into Fishing Bridge General Store and grabbed some noodles, a Pepsi, and a Snickers for dessert. The store was only days away from closing for the season by this point, but they still had all the goods. After finishing up my meal, I went back towards where the wolves had been. As I increased in elevation, the clouds closed in, and something I hadn't seen since June appeared in the sky. Snow. The first snowfall of the season had arrived. As I got higher and higher up Dunraven Pass, winter creeped its way into the park. On the other side of the pass, things were a little drier, and instead of white, the brilliant oranges of Yellowstone's fall colors still showed strongly. In fact, these colors were the very reason I had come to this part of the park. This was the one area where fall colors still dominated the landscape, and I wanted to capture photos of wildlife in those colors. Within minutes of entering the valley, I found a pronghorn buck grazing along the roadside. He was extremely comfortable with my presence, so I got out of the vehicle and began to photograph him. He wasn't in front of orange aspens like I had been hoping for, but he still allowed for some great photo opportunities. I was ecstatic with the photos I had gotten, and after accepting me into his world for a moment, the pronghorn eventually moved on. However, as he did so, I saw a photo opportunity ahead that excited me even more than the one that I had just had. Okay guys, so I just got some killer shots of this pronghorn over here, but he is headed now towards this aspen grove that's right up ahead, and if he comes out in front of it, it could be some amazing photos, definitely once-in-a-lifetime photos, antelope and aspens with fall colors. This could be amazing, and I'm going to get up here and park and hopefully get these photos. I jumped out of the truck and walked down into the meadow where a vibrant stand of aspens stood. The pronghorn was moving this way quickly, and I knew if I was going to get the shot I was dreaming of, I would have to be in position long before he got here. I anxiously waited for what seemed like forever. I had lost sight of him, so I had no idea if he would actually pop out here or if he had unexpectedly changed directions. Thankfully, he hadn't, and after a bit of waiting, the pronghorn walked exactly where I had hoped he would, stopped, and raised his head, and I fired off the very shot I had driven to this area of the park for. Man, did this pronghorn give me some incredible photo opportunities. Pronghorn are some of my very favorite species to photograph in Yellowstone and are so underrated in my opinion. They so closely resemble those African antelope of the Serengeti Plains despite being totally unrelated. Now that I've gotten some good pronghorn photos, I'm excited to go to Africa to photograph true antelope species in the future, which is something I will be doing with one of you guys, one of my subscribers, when I hit 100,000 subscribers. For those of you that haven't heard about this before, I'm giving away a free African safari to one of my subscribers when I reach the 100,000 subscriber milestone. This will be an all expenses paid trip, and all you have to do for a chance to win is be a subscriber to this YouTube channel and enter in the giveaway at 100K. This is something I've done in the past here in Yellowstone when I brought a subscriber out and showed him around the park for 1,000 subscribers, and it's something I'm doing next year with the Alaska trip that I already have booked for 10,000 subscribers. So if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button down below, and who knows, maybe you'll be the lucky subscriber to join me on an epic African adventure at 100K. As the pronghorn moved away over a ridge, I looked to the sky, where the snowstorm from earlier was rolling through on the peaks above me, dusting them with fresh new snow, the first snow they had seen in months. I absolutely love the lush green hills and colorful wildflowers that come with spring and summer in Yellowstone, but man, does fall put on a beautiful show too. After taking in the beauty for a moment, I continued down the road, where I found a herd of bison. I shot some photos and video, and then the herd came down to the road and crossed. They headed deeper into the valley and down in elevation. This time of year, Yellowstone's bison are on a downward migration. They go to lower elevations outside of the park, where the snow isn't as deep in winter and food is easier to access. This migration has taken place each and every year for thousands of years, with the bison and other herbivores following the best foraging opportunities as the year goes on. After the bison had moved on, I drove back to where the wolves had been this morning to see what I could find. Night was nearing quickly, so I was hoping the wolves would become active again. Unfortunately, they didn't, but instead, I was able to find a few young elk sparring. These guys aren't big enough to compete with the dominant bulls for mating rights, but they are getting their practice in now. Maybe, if they're able to eat well over the next year, they'll be ready to compete next season. A few miles away, there were some cow elk foraging along the banks of the Yellowstone River. They weren't doing anything too interesting, so I shot a bit of video, then continued upriver into Hayden Valley, where I found a landscape scene that I felt had some real potential and I couldn't pass up on. Okay guys, so I was driving through Hayden Valley and I saw this really cool scene as I was driving through of these clouds, these storm clouds moving in over Mount Washburn and some of these other peaks here. And so I decided to come down here and set up a little time lapse. I've never done time lapse before, at least not, like professional quality time lapse where you take, thousands of photos and stitch them all together. But that's what I'm working on right now. And I'm pretty excited to see how this turns out because it is a really beautiful, moody scene, and I think it could turn out to be a really cool time lapse. And if I may say so myself, it did turn out to be pretty darn cool. After about 20 minutes of shooting, I figured I had enough content to put together a solid time-lapse, so I continued south to see what else I could do using the dramatic clouds and fresh snow-capped mountains in my photos. I had had an epic day in the park, and while I hoped I could find more to shoot, I didn't really expect it would get any better. Thankfully, I was proven wrong when just a few minutes later, I came across one of my favorite scenes I've ever had the opportunity to shoot. Unfortunately, it happened so fast I wasn't able to get any video, but the shot I got was a perfect way to end the day. The next morning, I got up early, but I wasn't able to find much to shoot until later in the day. The subjects I found were much smaller and much more aquatic than the subjects I'd shot the day before. River otters. When I arrived, the family of otters was sleeping in a pile along the banks of the river. The occasional head would pop up, but not much movement besides that. Eventually, the otters began to move around, cleaning and rubbing against one another. After that, they got up and began sniffing in the grass around them. Then ran upriver along the bank. The family stopped and scanned the river, looking for any danger such as a crossing wolf or a grizzly bear. Then dove in and swam around the corner and out of sight. This was my last wildlife sighting of the year in Yellowstone, as it was Monday and I had to head back to school in Bozeman shortly after filming these otters. By the time I would get the chance to return to Yellowstone, the park would be closing down for winter. However, as some of you might remember from the last vlog I made, there was one species that I wanted to photograph this fall that I had missed out on time and time again. Moose, and more specifically, bull moose. And where's the best place in the lower 48 to photograph moose? Grand Teton National Park. So the next weekend, after classes, I made my way south to the Tetons. By the time I got close to the mountains, night had fallen, so I went to bed and was up early to look for moose in the morning. I drove around all day long, looking for moose, and I got out of the truck multiple times and hiked around at a few moose hotspots to try and find them. All I found was a single cow moose, which was cool to see, but it wasn't the big antlered bull I was looking for. So, after a very unsuccessful first day, I got up early again the next morning and went out, looking in the same moose hotspots I had looked in the day before. Only today, I found some moose. They were pretty far out, and it was going to take some walking to get to them, but they were close to the last bits of fall colors that clung to the cottonwood trees, which I thought would make for beautiful photos. So, I walked out through the sagebrush towards them, and after a good little hike, got close enough to get some photos and video of them. There was a large bull out in the open and two smaller bulls under a nearby tree. Eventually, they all came together and sparred a bit. The larger bull proved his point, and the little guys got out of the area. This gave me the opportunity to finally, after hours of searching, photograph a big bull moose. A female moose soon came into the scene, and after the display the larger bull had put on, the smaller bulls didn't even try to go after her. The big bull had her all to himself, and as they made their way towards me, I was able to capture a few shots of him smelling to determine if she was in estrus and ready to mate. After this, all four moose wandered out of the sagebrush flats and down into a nearby creek bed, where they would bed down for the day. I made my way back to my truck and decided that until evening, when the moose would get back up and become active again, I would set my sights on a different species, grizzly bears. This turned out to be a fruitless effort, as I spent all day looking for them and found nothing. So I eventually headed back to the area where the moose had been earlier, where I went for a hike to try and find them. After a few miles of hiking upstream, I found a few photographers and a few moose. The bulls were still bedded down when I got there, but as sunset neared, they finally stood up. I got a few cool shots that were unlike the photos I usually go for, including this silhouette. As the sun went down, the smaller bulls sparred a bit, and then, before night fell, I climbed out of the creek bed and hiked back to the truck with a few other photographers that had parked in the same lot as me. The next morning was my last in the park, as I had to return to school the next day. So, I went out for one last ride to see if I could find any moose to photograph. As I headed north, I got a text from my friend Sam that there was a huge bull with a cow out in front of the Tetons, perfectly positioned to get a shot of him with the Tetons in the background. I made my way up there, and sure enough, they were out in the flats in the perfect position for photos. The cow eventually crossed the road, and the bull followed. Very quickly, they made their way into the aspens in the distance, much too far away for any good photos. I'm very happy with the photos I was able to capture in Yellowstone, and pretty happy with the moose photos I got in the Tetons. However, with that said, these moose shots weren't exactly what I was hoping to get this fall. I still think I can create much better work with moose in this stunning landscape. So, I guess it's a good thing summer is in full swing and fall in the Tetons is just 3 short months away. My opportunity to do these moose justice is coming soon.